So it's a warm welcome from everyone for everyone coming into this Centre for Global Higher Education webinar. Especially warm welcome for those of you who may not have been to one of our webinars before. My name is David Mills, and I am delighted to be hosting Professor Olusola Oyewole today. This is an important webinar for us. We often have research-focused presentations, but we really want to influence or to be able to facilitate conversations around policy, especially policy affecting global higher education, especially global higher education policy in the majority world, where so much of higher education is happening and developing very fast. So with that in mind, this is the second in our series with Obriel. Last week we had Ramon Torrent talking about the work of Obriel, and today we're delighted to host you, Prof, to talk about the African Association of Universities, the challenges you face. You have an illustrious career as a microbiologist, first in Ibadan and then internationally, and you've been in your current post, I think, for 3 years, and you have 5 more. So you have your feet under the table, I think, and you can see the issues. So we're really looking forward to hearing from you about the challenges that you are facing. Well, I can ask you to talk for about half an hour. We have a short discussant comment from one of our researchers who's presented before on the AU, and then we'll open it up to everyone for conversation. So before I start, especially for those of you who may not have been to one of our webinars before, this is a Centre for Global Higher Education webinar. We have them every week, every Tuesday at 2 p.m. UK time. You're all welcome to register and come along to any of our webinars, and you're also welcome to present if you'd be interested in presenting your research. We do record them, and we'll make it available tomorrow on our website. So that's the webinar address, website address, researchcghe.org.events. And we have a huge archive now of more than 430 webinars on all aspects of global higher education. And you can search those, and you can also see the slides and the transcripts as well. So there's a huge resource for those of you who are interested in doing research in this area. We suggest for now that you keep yourself muted. You can please ask questions in the chat function, especially towards the end. And I will invite you to turn on your video at the end, and you can ask your questions at that point. And we can proceed to having a really good, thoughtful conversation with Professor Olusola Oyewole. And so, with no further ado, we have a large audience for you. Prof, we have almost 70 people here and more people coming. I'm going to hand over to you to tell us about your thoughts on the AU.
Thank you very much, David. Permit me to share my slide at this particular time.
Yep, I'll just do that. You should be able to, that's it, that's good. Perfect. So you can go to a video and slideshow now.
Yes. Thank you. I bring you greetings from the Association of African Universities with headquarters in Accra, Ghana. We are the Apex Higher Education Association in Africa, and we represent higher education in the continent. I want to thank the Center for Global Higher Education for this invitation for me to share my views and converse with the leadership of higher education in the African continent and beyond. Today, I will be talking about the African universities as development agents, the role of regional cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to start with an historical look at universities in Africa, and to note that before the advent of modern universities in Africa, Africa has an indigenous African educational system. Indeed, the Egyptians were credited with writing as early as 3200 BC, and the school in Timbuktu, the university then, was founded as far as 1110 CE. None of these early institutions offered university-level education, but they were highly committed to generation of knowledge. So early in the African history is the realization of the need for education for the purpose of development. Ladies and gentlemen, modern day university education is a little different. In Africa today, we can also be said to be the origin of university education. For example, Al-Qarayan University in Morocco was established in 859 AD, very far and earlier than so many other world-class universities of today. Al-Azhar University in Egypt was founded in 970 AD. The modern universities that we have in Africa today have their origin in our colonial past. The oldest that I can remember is the Makerere University in Uganda, established in 1922. And in West Africa, we have the University of Ghana and the University of Ibadan. Many other universities have come up after that. Universities are supposed to support their communities. They are supposed to be engines of development. But before I continue today, ladies and gentlemen, permit me to digress a little and share with us something that is of concern to me and that should also be of concern to our universities, is the issue of the youth of Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, 70% of African population is under the age of 30. 20% of Africa's population is between the ages of 15 to 24. As I'm talking to you right now, Africa has the most population in the world with a median age of 19.7. By 2050, it's been speculated that African population will have increased by 50%. Let's talk more about our young people. Today, 40% of the youth in Africa are said to be unemployed. 60% of Africa's youth live in less than $2 a day. Very sad indeed. 30% of youths in Africa have no access to education. And 70% of our youths in Africa live in rural areas. And when you also look at it, 50% of Africa's youth consider unemployment as the biggest challenge facing their generation. You may be wondering why I'm bringing out these statistics about our young people. It's because our universities have important roles to play, not just to our society, but to our youth in the African continent. But this university issue that we talk about was the state of our universities in Africa. One, our universities are facing issues about massification, where there is expansion of access to the level that the facilities that are available may not be able to contain them. Today, African universities have experienced a surge in enrollment due to the rising demand for higher education in the continent. This big enrollment has had some impact on the quality of our university education. Another situation that I need to mention about our universities is about funding, especially as it relates to public universities. Public universities in many African countries suffer from chronic underfunding. Government allocations for universities are hugely insufficient, and they find it difficult to even cover their operational costs. Infrastructure development has get granted in many of our universities. And that leads me to the issue of infrastructures in many African universities. Today, many African universities operate with inadequate infrastructures, including poor libraries, insufficient lecture halls, and limited access to modern technology. This limits students' academic expenses and constrain the abilities of universities to offer cutting-edge research and practical training to the young ones. I should also mention the research output in many African universities. While many universities in Africa have made some strides in research, generally they lag behind when compared with the global dimensions. It's been said that in Africa, we publish 1.5% of global research outputs. This is very sad and it should not be. When we also look at the state of universities in Africa, our curriculum is very important. Many universities in Africa still use outdated curricula that fail to align with modern job market needs or regional development priorities. There is currently a growing call for universities in Africa to revise their courses to focus more on practical skills, entrepreneurship, and technological literacy. Many graduates from our universities face high unemployment rates due to the disconnection between the university education and the labor market. There's really a mismatch between the labor market needs and the curricula of many of our universities. I should also look at the global rankings and reputations of universities in Africa. African universities generally rank low in global university ranking. The top universities, such as the University of Cape Town in South Africa, Stellenbosch also in South Africa, and Cairo in Egypt, are exceptions. But most African institutions remain underrepresented in global ranking system. Quality assurance and governance is another important thing that we need to consider when we are looking at the state of things in African universities. I know that efforts are being made now to establish stronger quality assurance systems across the African university institutions. And our organization, the Association of African Universities, we are playing an important role in bringing this to be. What of university autonomy? The governance structures in many African universities still remain complicated with interferences from government bodies. In many cases, university autonomy is limited, leading to political appointments and management challenges that affect academic freedom and institutional effectiveness. Ladies and gentlemen, I will also talk about technological integration and digital transformation, especially at such a time as this. COVID-19 has accelerated the adoption of e-learning and virtual platforms in African universities. Unfortunately, not many institutions in Africa have been able to meet up to the expected standard. Ladies and gentlemen, what are the challenges facing universities in Africa? And I'm going to start with number one challenge that is very important to me, and that is that of the irrelevant curricula. Curricula in many universities in Africa are often a mixture of colonial models and few nationalistic inputs that has not really impacted on the desired graduates that we expect to have in the African universities. The second challenge facing universities in Africa is that of resources inadequacy and deficiencies. Public universities in many countries are struggling with insufficient resources to meet the rising demands. And this has implications for the quality of our education. The quality suffers as a result of insufficient faculty to student ratios. And we are overburdening the faculties and the resources that are available. Number three major challenge facing universities in Africa is that of limited funding, especially for research. Most of the research funding in African universities comes from international sources. Domestic research budgets are minimal. And one of the things we are doing in Africa is to encourage governments in African universities to establish research academies that can help to fund research in their own various countries. Unfortunately, funds committed by African governments to research is still limited. As I mentioned earlier on, because of the population, massification is a big challenge in African universities. The number of students has overwhelmed the available infrastructures in many of our universities. The quality of education often suffers as a result, with insufficient faculty to student ratios and overburdened facilities. Ladies and gentlemen, universities in Africa also have challenge with access disparities. Despite the increased access that we mentioned, you'll be surprised that there are still some regions that cannot send their children, their young people, to universities. Gender disparities can also manifest in terms of the gender. Many females, the young girls, still have problems in accessing education in many African countries. Many students from the rural areas or marginalized communities face challenges in gaining admission or even affording university education. But can I tell you, there are many people who are physically challenged, including the deaf and the blind, who are finding it difficult to access university education in Africa. Why? Because our universities have not made provisions for them. Staffing challenge is one that is very important, that is coming up in many universities in Africa. Faculty shortages and poor salaries for faculties have resulted in rapid deteriorating quality in many of our universities. There is this challenge of flight of qualified manpower because they cannot get fulfilled within the African university system. There is also lack of incentive for academic and research performance. African universities today suffer from brain drain, with many of their top academics and researchers moving abroad for better opportunities. This diminishes the local knowledge base and affects the quality of education and research in Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, another emerging challenge now is the digital divide. Many universities in Africa still lack adequate internet connectivity, especially where they do not even have access to electricity. And as many of us will know, data cost in Africa is so high compared to other regions of the world, and this affects universities in Africa. Security, political instability, and political interference is a strange challenge facing universities in Africa. This ought not to be. But let me just mention one more challenge facing universities in Africa is the problem of regional disintegration and poor collaboration among ourselves. It's quite easy for researchers in Africa to collaborate with other researchers in the North, rather than to collaborate with researchers among the African continent. I've brought these challenges up because there are things that we need to overcome. But despite all this, ladies and gentlemen, I need to mention that African universities have some roles and they are relevant to our development. there are some important questions that every one of us listening to me need to consider. What roles are African universities playing in a continent marked by poverty, marginalization, and unemployment underdevelopment? What roles are the African universities playing to help the continent to overcome the effects of the long-term colonization of our continent? What roles are African universities playing to connect to the new emerging technologies and use our knowledge for our development? I will tell you that our universities have tried their best. Generally, for many universities, we say that we have a tripod mandate of teaching, research, and extension or engagement, which many universities in Africa have got committed to. But beyond this, African universities have achieved much in human capital development. We have contributed immensely to human capital development. In fact, universities in Africa can be said to be the engine of national and global human development in their various countries. Universities in Africa have also contributed to research and innovation. Although we have not done much, but we've done a little based on the available resources that we have. Universities in Africa have also contributed to policy development in their various countries by providing forethought to economic development, sustainability, and job creation, so to say, within the African continent. So what I'm putting on ground is that universities in Africa, they've contributed to development in their various countries. But let's look at some specific areas. Examples of African universities making contributions to development. In the area of agriculture and food security, University of Makerere, for example, through its College of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences, has been instrumental in research on improving food security in Uganda and beyond. It has contributed to the development of drought-resistant crops and better farming practices that are helping smallholder farmers to adapt to climate change. The Federal University of Agriculture has made groundbreaking advances in agricultural research, particularly in developing improved crop varieties like cassava, yam, and maize. The extension program in this university is reaching to local farmers. So universities have contributed to agricultural development in their various countries and regions. Another area universities have made contributions is in the area of public health and disease control. And I need to bring out the issue of the University of Cape Town in South Africa, which have made contributions to global health, particularly in HIV/AIDS research. University of Ibadan is another one. It has, produced large numbers of healthcare professionals and conducted research that has influenced public health policy. Universities in Africa have made contributions. Entrepreneurship and innovation. University in Ghana has gained reputation for producing graduates who lead ethically and innovatively. This university's curricula emphasizes entrepreneurship, leadership, and technological innovation. They encourage their students to create solutions to local challenges. In fact, I was telling some people about this university last week. In Ashesi University, the universities conduct examination without invigilators because all their students have signed to an oath, so to say, to be ethically committed. These are great universities from Africa. Policy development and governance, and University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania have made good contributions to national and regional policy development. The same thing can be said of the University of Ghana. There are examples in the area of peacekeeping, peace building, and conflict resolution, We have the United Nations University for Peace in Addis Ababa, who have made a lot of contributions in this area. The same can be said about the University of Nairobi in Kenya. Technology and ICT development. The University of Witwatersrand in South Africa is at the forefront in this. Same can be said about the University of Lagos, which have produced many engineers, especially in mechanical engineers for the continent. Ladies and gentlemen, our universities have made contributions to our development. Environmental conservation and climate change. University of Nairobi in Kenya is at the forefront, as well as University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. What of capacity, higher education capacity building? And this is where I talk about the Pan-African University. This is a continental university established by the African Union Commission. And the intention of this university is to produce manpower for the African continent. Right now, the Pan-African Universities has 4 institutes: Water and Energy Sciences Institute, with center in Algeria. There's a center on basic science, technology, and innovation that is located in Kenya. There's a center on life and earth sciences based at the University of Ibadan in Nigeria. There is a center for governance, humanities, and social sciences based in Cameroon. And indeed, the headquarters of this university is in Cameroon. There's a plan to have a center for space science that will be based in South Africa very soon. Ladies and gentlemen, our universities have made great contributions to development in Africa. But very importantly, in our operation at university is the need to promote regional cooperation and integration among our universities. Promoting regional cooperation and integration among our universities will help us to maximize shared resources. It's very important that universities in Africa work together because it will promote collaborative research within the African continent. Regional cooperation among our universities will also facilitate mobility and knowledge exchange in Africa. It will help us to further promote quality assurance and develop harmonized standards within the African continent. Ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about regional cooperation and integration in higher education in Africa. This will help us to mitigate the brain drain phenomenon that the African continent is suffering today. It will go further to address economic and social integration within the African continent. It will also help us to build the capacity for policy formation that will drive development within the African continent. So we need to promote cooperation and collaboration among ourselves. We need to promote regional integration. Situations where in Africa we talk about Francophone system, Anglophone system, and others should no longer be. My organization, the Association of African Universities, we are at the forefront of promoting regional cooperation and integration in Africa. As an organization, the Association of African Universities is a champion and advocate for higher education in Africa. I'll just mention some of the things we do in AAU. AAU advocates for higher education, the development of Africa that we need and the Africa that we want. That is our message to universities in this continent. AAU is also committed to building the capacities of higher education institutions for that to be competitive and relevant to national development. We promote and facilitate collaboration and networking among universities across Africa. We also committed to nurturing leadership and governance of African higher education institutions so that they can be adaptive and responsive to emerging conditions and needs. Other things that we do at the Association of African Universities is that we are committed to promoting collaboration among the regional education networks, such as the Inter-University Council of East Africa, the Southern African Regional University Association, Association of Arab Universities. We work with all of them together. AAU is also committed to building the capacity of leadership in African universities. Ladies and gentlemen, in AAU, we organize various capacity building activities on new developments in knowledge, such as artificial intelligence, among others. We organize webinars and conferences where issues of development and regional integration are discussed. We also organize massive online courses in conjunction with our partners, such as Obre Global, on regional integration. I need to mention that our association with Obre Global is very important to what we do at the Association of African Universities. AEU is committed to connecting universities in Africa to universities in other parts of the world, especially Latin America and Asia. We promote research collaboration among universities in the continent, and we collaborate with the African Union Commission in promoting some continental initiatives. It is very important that we empower our universities to become agents of development. What should we do? How can our university be empowered so that they will become agents of development in their various regions? The first thing I see, ladies and gentlemen, is to look at our curricula. We need to decolonize the curricula of universities in Africa. Our universities should be bold to change our curricula to meet the needs of the time. We need curricular reforms in African universities. I give you an example of the Assechi University in Ghana and Stellenbosch University in South Africa, where they've integrated entrepreneurship and leadership into their curricula so that graduates of this university will be job creators rather than employment seekers. I should also mention that universities need to reform very quickly. Very soon, our young people will not need your degrees. What our young people will be looking for are short courses that can give them some skills, and they collect the certificates or micro credentials to show that they possess those skills. I know that our professors are underpaid, and the solution is that it's high time our professors and researchers start to do research that will lead to innovation. They do not need to spend all their lives every 5 days or 6 days in the week working in the university. Their innovation should lead to some enterprises that can give them other funds beyond what they have. Ladies and gentlemen, number two thing that we need to do to empower universities for development is to focus on innovation. African universities should be empowered to do research relevant to the needs of Africa. We should not just do research for promotion purposes. Our research should lead to innovation that can impact on our young people and our society. Thirdly, ladies and gentlemen, the system of teaching and learning in Africa needs a change. Many countries in Africa still employ this teacher-focused teaching and learning method. This is the innovations that our young people need to express. African universities should be empowered to reorientate their learning through the evolution of learner-centered methods that promotes innovation and critical thinking in our young people. We need to equip our students with practical skills needed in low industries. They are reducing the gaps and boosting employability of our graduates. African universities should adopt learner-focused methods and embrace technology in teaching and administrative processes. We should also promote African values in Africa. We've been dealing with other values, ladies and gentlemen. Let us cultivate our traditional African values. Example is Ubuntu. You are I am because you are. These are traditional values that universities in Africa should connect to for us to become what we should be. Ladies and gentlemen, we can also empower universities to become agents of development by promoting public-private partnership. Some universities are already doing this, but there are some programs that are connecting our universities to some international organizations such as the World Bank, and we need to do more so that our universities can be further developed. I also believe that for universities to be empowered for development, technology, digitalization, and ICT investments are very important. This is already happening. E-learning platforms and blended learning programs are emerging in Africa thanks to the COVID-19 pandemic. We should also promote the Centers of Excellence initiatives. It's becoming a model. People talk about Center of Excellence initiative that we run in Africa, Association of African Universities, being funded by the World Bank. But more importantly, I want us to look at the tenets of these Centers of Excellence initiative. They help our universities to do cutting-edge research that are meeting the needs, solving the problems of the industry. This network is connecting the academia to the industry. And then we are building researchers for the future. These are things we need to do to make our universities to become agents of development. We also need to challenge our university to develop their own institutional policies for and it's very important now than ever before. Ladies and gentlemen, in concluding this presentation of today, I need to mention that our universities have for long remained the unused strength of the African continent. Many leadership, many governments in Africa behave as if they do not need their universities. This should not be. Ladies and gentlemen, Africa needs to recognize its universities as a critical organ for its development and its integration. But for universities to be what they ought to be, we need to make sure that universities are recognized as agents of development and integration in our various countries. And let us empower our universities to overcome those critical challenges that I mentioned at the beginning. Those challenges can be overcome. Our universities can be empowered. Ladies and gentlemen, I strongly believe that together, African universities can drive the continent's sustainable growth. Africa needs our universities. I want to thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A round of applause. That was a wonderful high-speed review, Prof, of all the issues that African universities face. But you also did a great job of highlighting the successes, the achievements, the many things that your universities are doing. So that was great. Thank you very much. Now, those of you new to the Center for Global Higher Education, we do tend to welcome research presentations, but we're also very keen to have conversations between research and policy. And at this point, I mean, I could ask some questions. We have some great questions in the chat. Please, you can add your questions as well. But first of all, I'm going to call on a PhD student because we often welcome PhD students to talk. And this is David Chainuma, who is currently a candidate at ECNU in Shanghai. And he's been doing some research on experiences of AAU. And so he's kindly offered and Prof has kindly agreed to have a few discussant comments just to get us going. David, the screen's yours.
Right, thank you very much, David Mills. Yes, and thank you, Professor Oyewole, for the hard work you're doing with AAU. Okay, so I'll go straight to my point. And yes, AAU is doing significantly well, and that one cannot be ignored. But I've written on it, but it's just some 5 years ago. Yes, we see governance. Okay, so with what our Professor Oyewole just mentioned here, it's all dwells with education governance. How is education governance going on in Africa? And what is the global education governance going on? And through our research with AAU and other meta organizations in Africa and abroad, we see that there is this trend, which I recommend, is a discursive governance in a way that, okay, so we have some African governments who are politically influencing higher education institutions and some which are actually, let me say, bounded autonomy. How can we or how can AAU get in there? Is by using the discursive nature of governance, which is by using big ideas. In fact, they have the big ideas, the power of ideas, how they can permeate into these institutions, not necessarily trying to build, say, a system in those schools. But these could be done discursively, partnerships, as Professor already said. But with these policies that they have and initiatives, they lack funding. Yes. And where does these fundings come? They have all these big policies there. They have all these initiatives to help African universities. But without funding, how can this come in? And this is where we have to also come in with African governments and other funding agencies in Africa, is that they actually see African canon as disparaged because they don't see it as serving the needs or contextual needs of our of our system. And that's where it comes to curricula, what Professor mentioned about. But in reality, can we decolonize this kind of curricula? Because all these, the professors and other big persons in these universities, their children are on Cambridge schools, curricula in the schools. And that's what we actually pay attention to. We don't like what is being made there, and also how many polytechnics or technical universities are mimicking research and academic universities. This is the problem because they also need funding. It is very difficult to decolonize this. It has a long way. But if AAU will go in as a discursive institution, of which sometimes I label them as neutral, but some say that they are not neutral, and how they can go in with funding as well. And now I move quickly to research. I will recommend David Mill's book on Ghanaian publication. I started reading that. And okay, so when it comes to research, the question that keeps on coming is how many professors actually publish with African journals or journals hosted in Africa and for Africans. As a young student, it's hardly for me to see our top professors publishing in these journals. Of course, it's because they delay how you submit manuscripts to them, the longer periods it takes for even a response. So how can we also bring up our journals hosted in Africa? In fact, AAU has a journal, a joint journal, with other universities. How are we patronizing this journal? In fact, can we check their citations over and over again? We are not. So if we who are following our professors, the big people in academia, they are not publishing there, how can we come and also try to publish there? And so that makes it very difficult for us to promote innovations in there. And again, when our students graduate masters and undergraduate, many of our research are dumped, they are shelved, they are not published on their educational websites. So how can we also know the innovative ways? Because you see students doing excellent works, but they print them, they are in shelves, and they cannot be accessed. Now it's about IT, how all these ways can be there. But it's very important that we are not getting that. And Professor, my last one is on the second question that our professor says, what roles are African universities playing to help the effect of long-term colonization of the continent? Of course, it's about how we embrace change. Now, there are a lot of curricula which would help Africa, like eco-pedagogy, eco-pedia, and AI. How many universities are actually outrolling these courses or programs? You will not get them. In fact, all the universities Professor Oyewole talked about are private. Stellenbosch in South Africa and Asahi University in Ghana. They are private universities. So maybe AAU can also look at private universities as well. I know that AAU is more of the research institutions. I think private universities, they have different curricula. Their curricula are most, I would say, perfect, which could help us bring up innovation. And the looming crisis to us all is about academic hegemony with our institutions, where we get that professors would not want to promote the younger ones. Although they are publishing, they are making strides, but there is that kind of hegemony. In fact, this was what I got from one of our race, one of the meta organizations in Africa that I interviewed the CEO. So that the invested interest with professors in there. And so many of them would like to travel to the UK or Europe. Or now the hot cake is China. They're traveling there to become professors there. Because for that place, they would embrace them and embrace their innovations than the hegemonic way. So this is what I would like to add and comment on. Thank you very much, David Mills, and thank you so much, Professor Oyewole, for the excellent presentation.
Great. Thank you very much. I mean, David, you've posed some difficult questions, but as you rightly acknowledge, there are some amazing things happening in some of these universities. So Prof, you can't possibly address all these topics. Is there any immediate one you'd like to prioritize in response to those comments?
Yeah, I would probably be glad to get the opinions of some other people on this platform. I can see values here. Many of them are willing to make contributions to this discussion. Let's listen to them too.
Great, super. That's ideal. So you're right. Professor Varghese was very keen to ask a question. And why don't you start, Professor Varghese, and then we'll go to Ramon, who also made a comment in the chat, and then I'll go through the chat as well. Prof Varghese.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Olusola, because we know each other for a fairly long period of time, and you also know that I have been working very actively in African higher education. So I enjoyed your presentation. It was a good reflection.
Absolutely.
I have three more very brief points. One is that taking from what David was trying to explain, I feel that your focus is on public institutions and their contributions to national development. Perhaps the private universities have a different orientation, and they are providing mostly employment-oriented. They are mostly teaching shops in a, if I can use that word, a right word for a wrong reason or a wrong word for a right reason. It's a mostly teaching institutions rather than research and teaching institutions, unlike the public institutions. So therefore, I feel that the focus was perhaps on the public institutions, universities, and their role and their contribution to national development. A second, one thing which is common among all the developing countries, especially those countries which are ex-colonial countries, we look westward for collaborations, cooperations in research, in all other activities. And perhaps one of the ways in which we may try to develop this is a sense of having collaborations and cooperations within the universities, within the continent, within the country, and that is how regional cooperation can be developed. You have worked on this, I know that. And I feel that one area perhaps you did not touch upon was the role of diaspora in Africa, because quite a lot of work that has been done and a lot of collaborative research and publications are coming out. And unlike in other regions, perhaps Africa has a better richness in terms of diaspora's contribution and their interaction to the national development programs and especially research, research activities, etc. So I feel that I enjoyed your presentation, but I thought that these are small notes that I would like to add. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Olusola, once again for your very good presentation.
Thank you.
Excellent. That's really helpful, Prof. Geza. And you're right that there are sort of lots of things we could pursue. I'm going to ask Ramon, who's president of Obrial, to briefly comment on the presentation as well. You were very early to write something in the chat.
Thanks, David, and all. In fact, I didn't ask for the floor because I want to be very brief and leave the floor to others. My only 3 comments are the following. First, we must continue to work on this and discuss. Within your framework, David, you must organize a seminar, a series of webinars on how to redefine the traditional 3 functions of universities. We cannot continue to say words, in fact, a jargon that is no longer applicable to the real world, in particular in Africa. This is the first comment. The second comment is that plenty of important problems can be raised and questions be put forward, but there is no magic silver bullet. There is no one solution for this. But what is clear is that the solution will not come following a standard mainstream recipes, in particular from institutions in the North. We must get your help, David, and that of the Central of Global Higher Education, to give the word to people like Olusola, to people like in the regional or economic organizations in Africa. The way forward must not be established from Washington, New York, Brussels, or even London. It must be established from Africa. It's people like Olusola and like most participants today who know how to move forward. And I will leave it here.
Yes.
I will skip the third in order to leave more time for other people.
Good, thank you. Thank you, Ramon. I do want to make as much time for comments as possible. And Dalu, Kufi, you had your hand up quite early on, and Beatrice, you did as well. Beatrice on the
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the presentation overall. I'm from Ethiopia, RC University. I have been in Association of African Universities as a contributor in different forms, not actually face-to-face, but it's today that I've come. I have 2 points to add on what arrangements are now playing in universities, especially from my experience in Ethiopia. My friend, who is a PhD candidate, has already stressed the burden and leadership, university leadership, concerted leadership, that's politically laden. I don't like to kill time on that. The other point I want to stress is the matter of using education as a system which requires refreshment and transformation itself in terms of curricula, the instructional strategies, and dynamism that's required to go with the 21st century requirements, demand in the market, and human development as a system itself, and education as a means of transformation itself, as an instrument of social change. Now, the problem lies to me in giving weight to balancing the system as education as a system and education as a tool for change. Actually, the priority should be on using education to indigenize it, to use it as a local means of building African and Africa-related curricula, Africa-related gets for research and community engagement. And that should be transformed. To my understanding, transformation itself should be something grounded in Africa, like it was in geotropism and plants. So this is the first I want to suggest, if at all research is possible or discussion. The other point is the tantalizing effect of market demand. Whose need is manifest in market? Is market really predictable, Or are we to wallow with changing situations of buyers? That itself appears to me a bit challenging. If we are to change with the demand of customers or our curricula and ways of teaching and learning with outcomes thereof, we may face some difficulties. So that really is a bit tantalizing to me, a bit dilemmatic, a dilemma, because we take education to be a system of developing generation, and at the same time, we stick to market demand, which changes from time to time. So that may need us to gain experience worldwide, what the world like now in developed countries, apart from what Africa has. The other issue I face.
Can I just come in here? Sorry, so to jump in, but we probably ought to try and bring other people in, Andrew. Thank you very much for all those comments.
Okay, shall I end?
If you wouldn't mind, do you have one last thing?
Yeah, I can end. But only one point: compartmentalized or departmentalized mindset is also a problem in Africa, and so far as I know from my region. An engineer thinks on his way, forgetting pedagogy, and a pedagogist thinks on his own, forgetting the rest departments, disciplines. This may also be a problem in higher education. This is an end to my suggestion. Thank you.
Good, thank you very much. So we haven't had many female commentators, so I'm going to ask Beatrice and then Hyacinta Kesi to ask their questions, please.
Right. Thank you very much, team, for this beautiful and yet very useful presentation. I just got to know about it this afternoon, shared by my professor and head of my institution, Professor Upenjuru Lada. I think you all know him. I am a medical doctor, a pediatrician, and an endocrinologist who just recently graduated in with a PhD from the University of Bergen, Norway. And one of the things that I would like to bring forward is that if we, Africa, we are to move forward, number one, we have to ensure that we encourage young people who are pursuing their PhDs to be able to be kept at home, not to have brain drain or waste away their qualifications. The case in time is that many times, most of our colleagues, including myself, I speak with a lot of pain because many times we finish PhDs and then we are rendered redundant, and you just can't apply what you will have, you are not enabled or encouraged or supported. We are not supported to put the PhD into perspectives, given the resource limitations. I'm talking in regards to the health care sector. And yet the problems that we studied, like for instance, I looked at small newborn babies at community level. And during the data collection, I noticed that we could do a lot of interventions at household level and empty the hospitals of hospital admissions and necessary hospital admissions, which is draining the resources for Africa because of diseases which are preventable, for instance. But we do not have forums where we can, put this kind of ideas forward and be able to nurture them so that they can be used for development purposes. We know that health is wealth. So if we are to talk about development, we need to have a healthy population, which is ready to provide the human core capital that is going to be needed now and in the future for the development of Africa. And then the other thing is that the young PhDs get discouraged and even go off. Some of them even leave the academia and just get brain drained away and go away, like to UN and so on and so forth outside of Africa. At the end of it all, Africa is losing, all because we are not being promoted, for instance, to the necessary academic ladder, given the kind of resources that are put on us, and then also the
Sorry, Beatrice, I'm going to stop you here. We do have lots of people who would like to ask questions. And so
one last one, sir. Just one minute.
One question, yes, yeah.
The last one is whatever we are going to do in terms of research for development, it must be for the people, with the people, by the people. So we cannot talk about universities bringing research. Bringing about development if we just assume and bring things which are working elsewhere in other parts of the world and dump it on the African continent. Two Fridays ago, 2 people presented their PhDs on traditional medicine.
Yep.
One from Zimbabwe and one from Uganda. And I can assure you, the audience was oversubscribed. Over 1,000 people each attended online, to the extent even the presenters were not able to log in order to present. So we should start thinking of what will work for Africa by going down to the grassroots, the real consumers of what development is about, and those who are supposed to drive development, so that we have context-based and context-driven development if we are to work with the people as African universities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. No, I think everyone would agree that this is about endogenous development. So I'm going to ask 3 more people to speak very, very quickly, and then I'll ask Olusola to respond. So Dr. Kesi, just a really quick comment, and then Kennedy, and then Sam Fongwa.
Yeah, thank you very much for the nice presentation, Professor Olusola. Yeah, what you have been explaining is quite the same in our country. The overpopulation of students, the unemployment situation, and now we want it to be more practical so that they can be more employed. So we need also to contextualize our learning in our environment so that they can be employed in our local environments. So we need to move around to the field with the students to show them practical issues. So my question is that moving to the field is one extreme, and being digital is another extreme. Now, how practically can we combine the two? Because we want to digitalize for the overpopulation. At the same time, we want them to be practical as to move to the field. Also to ask our presenter, not only to insist on government institutions or universities, let's think of the private university also, because that's where I'm coming from. Thank you, but your presentation was very nice.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kesi. That's really helpful thinking about the digital. Final comment from Kennedy, and then we'll go back to Prof for final thoughts.
Thank you very much for the fine presentation. I just want to make a quick comment with respect to the implementation of the decolonization of our curricula. It is practically impossible to achieve that if the funds are not available. We are not in control of our polity. There is neo-colonialism in Africa, in some African countries, and in some parts of Africa, we are not in control of our wealth. So how can we fund the implementation of this decolonization of the curricular system? I want to suggest an international body that will oversee this implementation in African countries. If we leave it to university commissions, they may not be able to do that. But if we have an international body that will look into these universities and to ensure this curricular implementation, it is a good step in the right direction. Thank you.
Good. That's an interesting thought there. Thank you very much, Kennedy, for a convention on decolonization. I certainly think there's lots more to do, and perhaps we never really can decolonize, but we have to keep working at it. Prof, this is an impossible task for you. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to finish, and before we wrap up.
Let me thank David, who is doing a PhD on AAU, Association of African Universities, from China. I hope that other universities in Africa will see the need to carry out research studies on their own organizations. 5 important statements that I want to make. 1 is that universities can drive development. Let our governments allow universities to play their role in their various countries. Number 2, our university professors will need to change the way they operate. Focus on publications that has no meaning should stop. Let us advance our research beyond research to innovations. Number 3 thing I need to mention is that collaboration and partnership is essential. Let us promote South-South-North collaboration in Africa. It will help us to move forward. Now, number 4 is that our diaspora is waiting. They are waiting to connect to universities in Africa. I know that many of us in academia in Africa, we are resistant, but please allow our diaspora. They want to become virtual diaspora, virtual academicians that can help your universities. Let's connect to our diaspora. And lastly, this is very important. We cannot continue to use the old methods and expect new results. It's not possible. So please, let our universities employ technology for our teaching, for our research. Let us not be afraid of changes. Let us focus on skills and competencies for our young people to be able to meet up the needs of the time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. You've given a really stirring defense of the possibilities that the African universities need to seize. And I think you've given us a really strong case for why the collaboration that's enabled the soft power, as David Kainuma puts it, that the AAU has is able to do a great deal. So I think we'll have to wrap it up here. Thank you all very much for coming. We do want to carry on these conversations that are research informed, that are also policy informed. We will, I think there are so many things that have been addressed today that we need to return to. So we will look into doing further webinars. I think the questions of knowledge exchange, particularly, for example, university industry collaborations, that's a really big question that perhaps African universities could do more on. The questions of funders and how they steer universities, that's another big question, the government funding, and you've raised funding throughout, Prof. I think there's the questions around how you support a diversity of universities, which is also David raised, how you support different types of tertiary institution in a world where we need a diversity of tertiary provision that supports all our young people and everyone really to carry on lifelong learning. So you've really just started the conversation, and I'm very keen to ensure that we carry on bringing researchers together with colleagues who have higher education roles to sustain this. So thank you all again for coming. Next week, we have the third webinar in our series, which will be focusing particularly on quality assurance initiatives and something which Obrial has been involved in called a HAQUA. And this is really great because this is a way in which you hand over debates around what counts as quality to African universities themselves. And I think the results have been really interesting. So I think, that's a great example of the ways in which you can encourage endogenous conversations. Thank you all for coming again. Do listen to the webinar recording tomorrow, and the transcripts and the slides will all be available there as well. And in the meantime, have a good rest of the day, and hopefully come back and see us next week and many other future events. Prof, thank you very much for your time. It was a great presentation. See you again soon, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.